Hello, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Psychs with myself, Dr. Adam McCartney, and Mike Lane. Today, we have a very special guest, someone I'm very keen to have on the show, and that's Andrew Curran. Andrew Curran has released a book called, Andrew, what is your book called? It's quite a funny title, isn't it?
So it's called The Little Book of Big Stuff About the Brain because it's A5 size, so it's a little book.
I was petrified of messing that up, so I'm glad you did it. Andrew, I want to first off thank you for coming on the show, and I'm personally keen because I've read most of your book, and it is just packed full of interesting facts about the brain and how we learn as humans. But let's have a little bit of your background. What's been your journey so far?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Adam and Michael as well. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I'm from Northern Ireland, Adam, just like yourself. Yeah, it's and I trained in Queens and Belfast, and then actually ended up doing an awful lot of medicine all around the place, but ended up in paediatric neurology. And as a pediatric neurologist, got really interested in how the healthy brain works, because you understand disease better if you understand health, in my opinion. And then through that, got very interested in the process of learning. And this is part of my own personal path of actually unlearning a lot of psycho-emotional injury that was done to me, not on purpose by anybody, but as a child and as an adolescent. And about 25 years ago, started talking and supporting teachers in learning the developing science of neurobiology and the neurobiology behind learning, and particularly the importance of central emotional one-to-one connection with each individual you're teaching.
Yeah. And that's going to be really important in today's podcast because, as we were explaining beforehand, one of the things we try to do for teachers is create and give them strategies or conditions that allows them to move with the classroom and develop their own strategies and basically embed something that they can take away. And your book, I think, is a good place to start because not only do you explain the science behind it, but you do talk about the conditions that allow for it to happen. And you mentioned something about is it localized learning or was that?
Yeah. So what I became very interested in was the actual cellular interactions that allow successful learning to occur, because learning happens because you connect nerve cells together into patterns, and those patterns are the way you store the data. So if I say the word cat, everyone listening will go, oh, cat, that's a word, and will understand the word. But if you give it a couple of minutes, you remember how a cat feels when you stroke it, the smell of cat litter, the sound of the cat flap going, all the things that you associate with cat. And that's because by me saying the word cat to you, if you've emotionally connected with that word, your brain has stored throughout it patterns of nerve cells that have been wired together to carry all those bits of information. So pretty much anything you do activates about 60 to 70% of your brain, because it's stored, all this data is stored in different parts of the brain. And I got very fascinated in how do you optimize the neurobiology of a brain so those connections between the cells form, so you hardwire in the knowledge, so it's high quality knowledge that you retain for years and which you can recall readily.
So you need if I'm hearing you correctly, you need an emotional connection to the topic. Is that correct?
No, you need an emotional connection to the person who's giving the topic. If you've also got an emotional connection to the topic, that helps. But the whole system of connecting nerve cells is actually driven almost entirely by your emotional brain, not your intellectual brain. So that if you've got a one-to-one, reciprocal, trusting, honest relationship with an individual, you will optimize their brain's neurobiology to form those connections and for learning to occur.
Fascinating. That is fascinating, isn't it? Why is that?
Because the key neurochemical that's involved in forming these synapses is called dopamine. Now, dopamine is the neurochemical that we all, or a lot of your listeners will know, becomes deficient in the very tragic adult condition of Parkinson's disease. And because of that, billions of dollars have been spent on investigating Parkinson's disease and dopamine neurochemistry. And we now understand that the act of making and breaking connections between nerve cells is called synaptogenesis. Synap is the synapse, which is how two nerve cells communicate with each other. Genesis is the creation of, and also actually the dissolution of. So dopamine is also involved in breaking connections as well as making connections. And dopamine is the key neurochemical involved in synaptogenesis. It's the one that you have to get right, like an artist with their finest brush, finishing off the shadow of a leaf or an eyebrow on a portrait. So right concentration, right time, right nerve cells. And then they grow out these connections between them called dendrites. They form brand new synapses. And that is the start of creating these patterns that represent learning. 93% of dopamine secretion in the brain is under the control of your emotional brain.
And so dopamine secretion is under control of the emotional brain. And one of the key things I took away from reading your book was that for those who've experienced trauma and things like that, the dopamine secretion can be really affected. Is that right?
Yes. What happens in high stress situation? Another neurochemical comes into play called noradrenaline, which is the cousin of adrenaline. The brain uses noradrenaline rather than adrenaline, to do with molecule size. But the more noradrenaline you have, the more memory is driven into the unconscious. And the more it's driven into the unconscious, the harder it is to access it and unlearn that particular emotional trauma. And that's post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you have high energy patterns of neurons have been formed, stored in your unconscious, and they exert a destructive emotional pressure on your life. And we know that untreated PTSD reduces life expectancy by up to 20 years. So it's a really significantly neurobiologically important condition. You need some stress in learning. So in the classroom environment, of course, there's some noradrenaline kicking around the brain, but it's just enough to keep you involved and excited. The dopamine release, dopamine also controls the attentional system in the brain, and it also controls the reward system in the brain. So you end up in the optimal classroom environment where not only is each individual in front of you optimized for forming connections together, but they're experiencing reward from that, and you've got their full attention.
That is absolutely fascinating, Adam, isn't it? We've been talking, Andrew. I'm sure you've listened to all our episodes to date.
Oh, every single one.
On twice.
I had half an hour on a flight, so I listened to them all. It was,
Yeah, it was a very long flight then.
No, I just speeded them up. I listened to them like 10 times.
But the reason I say it's fascinating, Adam, is Andrew, is because a lot of our work is around supporting staff and support staff in schools.
Yeah.
To deal with children who have significant challenges. And when you start talking about trauma and PTSD, etc., I'm thinking about so many children,
Yes.
who have that sort of background.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, when we talk about relational approaches, you're effectively saying, really, this is so important.
It's central.
Right.
It's central. Yeah. There's a very brilliant educational paradigm which has been around for a while called expeditionary learning. And my wife, Andrea, has developed from it an even better one called Learning Without Limits. And it is the only education paradigm I've come across, and I now have 5 or 6 years experience of it and knowledge of it, that actually marries exactly with the neurobiology that tells you how to optimize learning. And it's a whole school paradigm which produces, Michael, exactly what you're talking about. It's produced an environment where it just doesn't matter what neurodiversity or attachment pathology learning you bring to school. You come into an environment which is reciprocal, trusting, safe, sensible. So, if trained physical restraint is needed, it's used. Andrea delivered this in 2 schools as head teacher and is now director a director of a thing called Cheshire Academy Trust, where they're delivering it across 11 schools. Within 18 months of dealing with the neurobiology through this paradigm, behavior problems almost disappear. Absenteeism almost disappears. And it is the most powerful educational paradigm for me as a neurobiologist that I've ever come across. So to answer your question,
give us a
Michael,
nugget of it, Andrew. Now,
okay, so it's based on a principle called expeditionary learning, created by an American who was an outward bound person. So it's expedition as in an expedition. And he got together because he took these, delinquent 15-year-old inner city American kids out into the wilderness and for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, they were transformed. 60% of them were now not delinquent anymore. So he thought, well, this is very useful. So he got involved with 2 or 3 educationists, and they developed this entire paradigm called expeditionary learning. And its entire goal and aim is indeed to produce an environment where everybody feels understood, where that environment is not only understood, because they're understood, it's very good for their self-esteem. Because those 2 things are true, their self-confidence is high. And because those 3 things are true, they're emotionally engaged with the environment. So their brain is optimized for learning. So they go into the environment expecting rewards. They experience rewards. They've got the full attention, and they just form connections between nerve cells. And it really, really delivers for Ofsted's outcomes, as well as much broader outcomes around emotional health and personal growth in each individual in that environment. And for me, if we could get every school in the world to deliver this educational paradigm, we would totally change society. Totally
how
change
would that
society.
look in you obviously work with mainstream education settings quite a bit as well. How do you see that playing out in a mainstream setting?
Well, it is I've seen it delivered in 2 mainstream settings on actually visiting the schools and experiencing the environment. In the Cheshire Academy Trust, where it's been now delivered for nearly 3 years, in July last year, 4 of the, at that time, 9 schools had Ofsted inspections. They got outstanding in all categories.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I defer totally to you guys, but my understanding is that has never occurred in any academy anywhere, where nearly 50% of the schools get outstanding in all categories from Ofsted. And under the new paradigm, a school was visited just recently, and of course they don't do outstanding anymore. They've changed the paradigms, but they got the second below top in all categories. So I can tell you factually this works. There is also XP Doncaster, which is a secondary school that delivers this. In Cheshire Academy Trust, there is now special needs schools as well. This is just a paradigm at a neurobiological level. Oh, if you've got quadriplegic cerebral palsy, GMSCS5, so fully wheelchair bound, not able to do anything, in a special school, you still have the same neurobiology. It may not work as well because you've got all sorts of structural damage in your brain, but you still have dopamine secretion 93% stimulated by the emotional brain. So you will be optimized by experiencing an environment which is respectful, caring, nurturing, one-to-one, and it's the one-to-one connection that counts. Look, for all you guys listening to this, and thank you, I know you're not listening to me, you're listening to Adam and Michael, but anyway, if you're also listening to what I'm saying, what I want you to remember is when you're at school yourself, right? I want you to just give me 10 seconds. Remember when you're at school yourself, and remember the teacher whose class you went into and you came out of it and you had just learned from them. Learning by osmosis, that was like a magical thing. Now, I know that because I do this every time. So I go to schools twice a month typically, and I've been doing it for 25 years. And I always ask the teachers to remember that teacher and then call out the words of how they felt with that teacher. And they use words like safe, engaged, excited, involved, all these words about activation of the emotional brain. And it comes down to that paradigm that I just described. With that individual, you felt understood. That individual was good for your self-esteem, for your self-confidence, and you're emotionally engaged with them. Now, You as a teacher have to produce those feelings in every single child in your class. You're the adult in the room. You're neurobiologically dominant. It's up to you to find how to achieve that with every child in your room. Emotional connection first. Trusting, secure, safe, firm, strong. Then go move on to education. And what you'll do is you'll transform that child's life. Doesn't matter what background they come from, doesn't matter what disability they've got. You are getting to their place emotionally. You're not expecting them to get to your place. Because if you're expecting them to get to your place, it's about you, not about them.
Yeah. The principles you're talking about are absolutely true and accepted across the education sector. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to my associate, Matt Robson, because he has gone through that journey that you're describing. However, I want to grind down what you're saying, because you're saying about how we all know the relational approach is important. And you've beautifully put it in the sense that dopamine secretion comes through that one-to-one connection.
Adam, just to interrupt you, it's not important, it's central. Neurobiologically, if it's not happening, you are not optimizing that child's learning, period.
Okay. But what I want to move on to is grinding that down into what it looks like in reality. If I'm a teacher, how do I create that atmosphere? How do I create that environment when I've got 20 to 30 children?
Well, that teacher who I've just asked you to recall achieved it with you because they put in the effort and the time to get to know you. Yeah. You, Adam, you, Michael, me, Andrew.
It's funny, this podcast, we come back to reflective practice so often about thinking about your own journey and what you can take from that.
It's not what you can take from that. It's what you bring into the classroom with you as your disharmonies. So I've been studying attachment theory for years now because it fits very neatly with the neurobiology, or neatly is the wrong word. It absolutely marries up together. Intense emotional experiences create very powerful connections between nerve cells, which you carry in your unconscious, which absolutely affects the entire trajectory of your life. So we know from attachment research that the core elements of you are formed up by the time you're about 1.5 years old. And your entire interaction with life from there on in, at a neurobiological basis, will be directed by that learning because of the nature of the structures that those patterns are stored in. They act as the conductors for the whole brain. So your brain will be conducted by these damaged disharmonic structures, and that will influence your entire life. That's what you as an adult are bringing into the classroom. And the main barrier to learning in your classroom is what you carry inside you.
That's
Adam,
isn't it?
Go ahead, Mike.
So that's very interesting, Andrew, because we do a lot of work with, like I said earlier, children with trauma, but particularly children who are with or under the virtual school. So children under the virtual school have gone through quite a lot of trauma, particularly around being able to trust in relationships.
Yeah.
And you know, when we're dealing with them as ed psychs, they're older than 18 months typically. As are the teachers. Is there anything from your experience that we can do in schools that could start to I wouldn't say remove the blueprint that you're talking about, but start to help to shape a new blueprint?
No, the job is to remove the blueprint. The connections between nerve cells, the single most wonderful, magical thing I've discovered in 35 years of studying the neurobiology is you can break the synapses. You can unlearn the connection between nerve cells. You can, excuse me, you can regain those nerve cells for you to reintegrate in your brain in a harmonic way. And in fact, as I was discussing with you guys before we came on air, I've just finished writing a show and we're getting it out there, which is to help everybody understand how they can look at themselves and go, wow, okay, so I don't know that part of myself. What can I do? I'll explain the neurobiology of how you can unlearn that. And teachers, particularly, So here's a little exercise. We got time. I want you to imagine you're walking among trees. Okay, they can be far apart or close together. They can be clogged with undergrowth, or they can be nice and clear, grassy spaces between them. And when you're walking through those trees, I want you to look up at the canopy, see what's up there. Is it winter? Is all the branches bare? There are leaves and maybe squirrels or whatever. And then look at the trunk on the trees and look at the texture of it and the color. And then look down at your feet as they're walking along the ground and see, well, is it grass or is it pine cones or what is it that you're walking on? And just keep walking. And you walk around a tree and directly in front of you is a tiger. What do you do? What do you do? Michael laughs, obviously. That's fine. What do you
He knows he's buggered.
That was fear.
Yeah, that's fear. Well done, Michael. Great shout. So the standard reactions are not necessarily laughter, Michael, it has to be said, but fear, run away from it, climb a tree, freeze, lie down, okay? What that tiger is, and this is a very old Buddhist meditation that you've just done, that is all the disharmonic neuronal patterns stored in your brain. And the reason it's a tiger is because your brain it's pre-programmed to be in this moment, because to be in this moment maximizes your survival chance. So what it does is it stores all those disharmonic, destructive patterns away. And then it doesn't want you to look at them, because to look at those and undo them takes a lot of hard work. It makes you less functional while you're doing it. And the brain's only interested in the second survival, right? But that tiger is the thing that is dictating the entire trajectory of your life. And in my own path, I've discovered a long time ago when I first met my tiger, the only approach to the tiger is step towards it. Because, guys, it's only virtual.
Yeah.
It's not a real tiger. It's just in your mind. It's just in your mind.
Andrew, I'm never going to Nepal with you. There's a few tigers out there.
And as you step towards it, what happens is you overcome your fear, because you've gone, well, hang on a sec, no, this is only in my imagination, right? It's just like a tiger. And the more you step towards it, the more you can start to actually learn what's in it, what memories are contained within it, how can you deal with those? And you start doing that by the very simple process of naming the emotion you're feeling now truthfully. Naming the emotion you're feeling now truthfully. I'm feeling angry, jealous, joyous, happy, bored. Name
That's
them.
why emotional literacy works so well.
Yeah.
That's emotional literacy, Adam. Absolutely correct. Yeah. And then you add, so that's mindfulness, naming the emotion truthfully and accurately. And then you think about it. And you go, why am I feeling angry at the moment? It's just some parking guy has put a parking ticket in my car. But do you know what? I parked in the double yellow lines for more than 20 minutes. It's my own fault. I've no one to blame but myself. But actually, if I think about it, he reminds me of an uncle who used to be really tough on me. And that's the stored pattern that you stored from childhood, altering your life's trajectory in the present. And that's just a really simple example. But your life is riddled with that.
It's Adam, it's reminded me of the conversation that we had recently with somebody called Gillian Goodwin. And Gillian's undertaken research into burnout in teaching staff. And we were talking about supervision and the usefulness of supervision models within the staff structure. And, you know, we need to remember, yes, we've been talking about children here, but your key thing there is the adult is having to help the child tune in. So if we have...
No, the adult has to tune into the child. And if the adult's stressed out of the tree, carrying an awful lot of attachment disharmonies, and whose life is really not running very well and it's quite difficult, well, that's what they're bringing into the classroom.
Yeah.
And that's not blaming anyone. That's being mindful about what you bring into the classroom.
So
And
they
the
all have
point
to
of-
face their tiger is what we're really saying.
they absolutely do, but that's an individual choice. But what you can do is create the environment where everyone in it feels understood, where the environment's good for their self-esteem and self-confidence, and where they feel emotionally engaged in the environment. And that's where you start in an organization. So it doesn't just apply to schools, it applies to businesses and hospitals and everything. If you can create that environment within it, then you have started the healing process, because those adults in it are now starting to be in relationships they can trust.
And
And that may be the very first time in their life that that's true.
you've mentioned this about systems, and in my own work, I spend a lot of time going into schools and reorganizing systems, over several weeks or days. And you reminded me of a particular case recently where all the adults were the key adults were facing burnout. I would say they were on the verge of quitting their job.
Yes. Yeah.
And what came from it was that the SEND side of everything became overwhelming. And it was a case that the Senko had to sit up and face the thing that was causing the most fear in this conversation. We would describe it as fear. And that became the turnaround point, really. Once they
That's
said,
exciting,
"Okay,
man. That's
how,"
wonderful.
it was like, how do I stop this sort of drift feed of everybody asking me questions? And it was just something as simple as, in this case, it was protect your time. And it was that fear of letting everyone down was getting to them.
Guilt
They've
shame.
got
Guilt
to
shame,
let
yeah.
somebody down in order
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
protect yourself and get.
Ah,
And that one action started to have a domino effect. And then
yeah.
the other senior leader was able to then focus more on the curriculum, which was their role. And then the teachers felt more contained. And then they were
Yeah.
able to face some of one particular teacher was very low, and she was able to look at the emotional impact of her moods on the children, and then she's able to turn things around. So it's just interesting, that tiger analogy. I think it's going to live with me for a while.
Yeah.
About how to bring that into practice, particularly around systems management, because we can look at it in a very technical aspect. That's really what we're, like you said, all dopamine secretion comes from emotional connection, and I think we all know that in our heart of hearts. But hearing that come out, what was it you said, 96% or something?
93%. 93%
93%
dopamine
of
is
dopamine.
secretion is under the control of the emotional brain. Yeah.
So a system has to be emotionally containing in order to
Totally.
get that.
Totally. And that's the whole point. That's why I keep banging on about this understood self-esteem, self-confidence, emotionally engaged, because that is the simplest breakdown of a neurobiologically optimized brain.
Andrew,
If you're sorry,
I was going to say thank you for that. No, there's one last thing I want to talk about with you, because you have a show, and it's all about neurobiology and music. Is that right?
yeah. So music, I'm a singer-songwriter and have been a musician for 40 years actually, and retired from the NHS a while back, and have now put together a band of very talented musicians. And we've got a show called The Little Show of Big Stuff About the Brain. No parallel with the book. And it's a combination of neurobiology and music. It's about 2 hours with it was 2 45-minute halves. And the idea of the show is the music is to allow each member of the audience to experience full activation of their brain. Music activates your brain from the spine up in a constructive way, so it makes it open and ready for learning, but not feeling threatened by the learning, because the music is making you feel good. And then we intersperse the songs with 10-15 minutes of neurobiology, which is the story of how your tiger grows, and then how to start unlearning your tiger.
Wow. Is that on Spotify or YouTube as well?
If you go to my website, andrewcurran.net, 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 then for those not listening in a Northern Irish accent, in a Northern Irish accent, it'd be andrewcurran.net, but that doesn't make sense to most people. So
Doesn't make sense to know the Irish people either.
yeah, exactly. That'll take you to it'll tell you all about the show, but it also takes you to the band website, which is thepromiseband.net, and that gives you an idea of the music we play and the whole emphasis on it. And there's some footage of the show and stuff all available, and it's people love it without being.
You got any upcoming dates that you want to get out?
No, we're starting to work. We hope to have one near Weston-super-Mare in the next couple of months. We're just working for venues. But anyone out there who's fascinated and wants us to come locally to you, just get in touch.
And Andrew,
Brilliant.
finally, plug your book because it is worth reading, especially if you're an
Oh,
educator.
thank you. So it's called The Little Book of Big Stuff About the Brain. It's on the 6th edition now. We've just added a new chapter, which covers both attachment and expeditionary learning. And yeah, it's full of really silly pictures. I'll briefly tell you about the pictures. So I was on a flight to Australia to present at a brain injury conference in Melbourne. And I had all the text of the book done. So I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to draw some pictures for this just to give an artist a guide. So I drew all these really silly pictures, including one of a squirrel having a panic attack. And I gave it to the publishers, and they said, yeah, that's great. Did Spike Milligan do those? So I said, no, just me. And so they're in there. So my apologies to anyone who gets the book. The pictures they're quite fun though, Adam, aren't they? They work.
They are definitely interesting, and we'll give you that.
Interesting. That's such a Northern Irish expression. Yes, Andrew. It's very interesting. That's fine.
Well, you know what, Andrew? I'd feel motivated to go and walk in a wood and go and find my tiger.
Good for you, Michael. Well done, man. Just the last word, anyone who does start to do that, please do. But remember, be absolutely open to getting counselors, antidepressants, adapt a healthy lifestyle. It can be very hard work, but absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Thank you.
On the antidepressant thing, like obviously they get a bad press, don't they? But I always remember when I
Antidepressants are
was,
great.
yeah, but
Sorry, not a
job.
job. Go on, tell me.
So they do the job, because I always remember when I was studying, not as long ago as you, Andrew, but a while ago, and my lecturer said to me, antidepressants, you got to think of it as a tractor tire stuck in a bog, and that's your mental health, and you've got to lift it, but you need some help to get it off the ground.
Oh, that's
And-
super.
Yeah.
I talk about the magic carpet over the rocks. So whenever I've needed them, I've always taken antidepressants because they give you the magic carpet over the rocks, so you can then work at breaking the rocks down into dust.
Yeah.
Adam, you're starting a whole new episode there.
Yeah, we'll pause it there. Andrew, if we would love to have you back on at some stage.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm just thinking about our poor listener just hearing us rambling. We probably should stop it there. And Andrew, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure and delight.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm one of your fan club now, just by the way. Okay.
Michael, thank you. I appreciate that.